So hello, everyone. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're joining us. I'm so happy to have all of you here today. My name is Dalia, and I work on Kong's community team as a global community manager. So today we have a very interesting presentation for you, how you can upgrade to Kong Gateway above 3.0 with zero downtime. We have Andrew here. He will introduce himself, and he will tell you all the strategies you need to know to make that upgrade. We will take all of the questions at the end, so please use the Q&A function and input them there. We will answer them as soon as he's done with the presentation. And with that, I'd like to pass it along to Andrew. Go ahead.
Brilliant. Thanks, Dalia. Hi, welcome everyone. So as Dalia said, today the topic is around upgrading Kong to Kong 3 with zero downtime. My name is Andrew Q. I'm a senior field engineer and technical account manager at Kong. I help a number of their strategic customers and enterprise customers with getting Kong installed, upgraded, and all sort of the ecosystems around Kong, getting that sort of all to production and ready for them to use. So jumping into today's talk, a quick agenda just about what I'm going to be talking about. First, we'll just go through some of the Kong deployment modes. So there might be a couple of you on the call that maybe aren't familiar with all the different deployment modes. So when I'm talking about them later in the talk, it should hopefully make a bit more sense. I'm just going to do a quick recap as to all the Kong 3 features, what's been released in the latest version of Kong, with a bit of a sneak preview as well within that. I'll talk about some upgrade strategies, so how you can upgrade, some of the considerations, things to think about, things to consider when you're doing an upgrade, how you choose a strategy, which strategy should I choose based on what I've just explained, a little bit about Kong LTS, and then lastly, just finishing off with upgrading of additional tools as well, because Kong is your API gateway, but you do have a number of other tools as well that you'll need to take into account and upgrade when you are doing that upgrade strategy. So before we kick off with everything, I think it's quite nice to start off just with the poll. So Darla, if you don't mind kicking the poll off. So yeah, if everyone could just answer the poll, I guess, what I'm looking at here is probably just understanding, from all the attendees today, effectively what gateways you are using. You may be here just to see what Kong's about. You may already use Kong, what versions you currently are using as well. And then if you've tried a migration, maybe you've already tried the Kong 3 migration unsuccessfully, or maybe you've got to a sticking point and hoping that, this might shed some light for you as well on that. So yeah, just give everyone a couple of minutes just to fill that in. And it gives me a good insight as well, I think, as to the level that I pitched the talk at as well. I have run this before at an in-person meetup, and I think most of the attendees didn't know Kong. So I think there was a lot that went straight over their heads just because I got quite detailed with a couple of the aspects. So it's just good to know, the audience that we've got today. Are you seeing some answers coming in, Dalia?
Yeah, I think we're almost done.
Cool, maybe a minute.
See, maybe like 1 more minute. Everyone who wants to place their vote can do it now. All right, let me end it. Cool. So what API gateway do you use? We have the Kong Gateway, the most popular one with 88%. What version of Kong? Most people actually use 2 point something with 76%. So this talk will be very.
They're at the right place. Yeah.
They're at the right place.
Yeah.
And then the last one we have: have you tried Kong 3.0 migration before? The answer is no, 88%. So
okay.
It's the right audience for you, Doc. Good luck.
Absolutely, thanks. Yeah. So that's really good to hear. So still a number of you on Kong version 2. And looking for, I guess, some insights and information on how to upgrade. So this is the perfect talk for you. So brilliant. All right. So cool. I'm going to close that. Let's jump straight into it. So before I start off, like I said before, I'm just going to run through a couple of bits and pieces about Kong. just to make sure everyone's familiar with, all of the deployment modes that you can actually deploy Kong in. So the first one is the traditional mode. So traditional is a mode of Kong that you normally deploy in sort of proof of concept phase. And it effectively is Kong running all together in one instance, whether that's an EC2 instance or in a single pod. It can be DB backed or DBless, but effectively having it all in one place. So, if you had to replicate that or do high availability, it would be replicating the entire Kong suite. So again, that's mostly for POCs. Hybrid is probably the most recommended deployment mode for Kong, and it's what we recommend at Kong for our clients to use into production. The difference here between traditional and hybrid is we're now removing the data planes, so the proxy, out of the control plane, and they effectively sit below the control plane and connect to the control plane via a WebSocket. So the communication between the two is done via this WebSocket, and that's how the data planes get told about the configuration changes. The control plane is still connected to the database, and that's how the configuration changes are made. And what's really good about this particular mode is that if the communication between the control plane and the data plane goes down, your data planes still keep running on the last known configuration. You can then scale out your data planes as well, and it gives you the ability to ensure that your data planes can manage your predicted traffic that you've got coming through. The next install mode is the Kong Ingress controller. This is a Kubernetes native way of deploying Kong. Recommended to deploy this in DBless mode. You can effectively deploy your data planes with your proxy and your Ingress controller in a single pod. There is a mode to actually have the Ingress controller in standalone mode outside and just deploy your proxies as well. But this is normally a mode that's used when you want to deploy Kong and configure Kong in a Kubernetes native way. And lastly, the Konnect SaaS offering. So that's Kong's new SaaS offering, which is effectively a SaaS control plane and developer portal. That is all managed by Kong. So you don't have to manage any of that yourself. You just deploy your data planes, and you can effectively deploy different bundles or different releases of data planes connected to different sets of configurations, which is the new concept called runtime groups, which I won't go into more detail. That's probably more along the lines of a Konnect talk. But yeah, that is definitely another deployment mode where you're just managing your data planes, and Kong is managing the control plane and the developer portal as well. So those are all the deployment modes. Let's move on to the features. So just going through a couple of the features that have been deployed in Kong. So starting off with Kong 3.0 was the first major release in Kong 3, which was released in September last year. A number of enterprise and open source features that have been added, but some just to highlight. The secrets management when general availability, which I think is a really nice addition, being able to connect Kong up to HashiCorp Vault or AWS Secrets Manager, and then being able to reference all of your sensitive data. And effectively, when Kong comes up, when it starts, it connects out to your secrets management system, and it replaces those placeholders with the values that come out of your secret management. So anything that you have committed into your repositories, anything that gets deployed as part of your Kubernetes resources, all of that stays as is, as the placeholders, and none of it gets, none of your secret information gets leaked out sort of anywhere in your DevOps systems. The new Kong or the new data plane Rust router is probably another one worth mentioning. So the router on the data plane has been rewritten using the Rust language. This has been a really big step forward in the Kong data planes and has added quite a lot of good performance improvements in the router. Also opened up a whole lot of other aspects to allow Kong to start improving on and adding to the features to the router. They've released the new DSL that allows you to effectively express your routes. So, it's just a starting point now, but there's a lot more to come, I think, down the road with regards to that DSL and what you can actually do from the core of Kong. There's been quite a lot of changes with regards to the images. So if you're running on Kubernetes, the Docker images, so a UBI and Slim image, which has been released, but I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second when I talk about the considerations. I think the other one that's worth mentioning as well, which is also an open source improvement, is OpenTelemetry. So OpenTelemetry has been brought into Kong and added to the core of Kong, which gives you the ability to be able to trace through Kong. What that gives you is insights into what's going on at an Nginx phase level, and that gives you the ability to see the latencies for all of the plugins that you're running for each request. The PDK, which you use to develop your custom plugins, now has a OpenTelemetry library within the PDK. So that gives you the ability to then hinge off of that OpenTelemetry, write your own plugins if you need them. But Kong 3 does come out with an OpenTelemetry plugin using that same feature from the PDK. So something worth looking into in Kong 3.0. Moving on to Kong 3.1, I think nicknamed the plugin release. Most of the changes here were effectively enterprise plugins, so new plugins that got added or improvements. So released in December of last year. One's worth calling out. I think App Dynamics is definitely a observability tool that a lot of our enterprise customers have been asking for. So that plugin is now there within Kong 3.1. Enhancements and improvements to the mock plugin as well. So giving you the ability to effectively give the plugin your open API spec and get Kong to mock out your endpoints. Quite a very nice and simple way to get your mocking out of your endpoint, especially on the developer portal. So yeah, something worth looking into for sure. And lastly, the JWT decryption plugin. So giving you the ability to decrypt your JWT tokens at the Kong layer, and then obviously being able to do things like sort of validate and have a look at those tokens if you need to. Moving on to the next version, Kong 3.2. Not as many features, I guess, released in this version, but I think some very important ones and ones worth calling out. The data plane scale out feature, I'm going to talk about in a little bit more detail in a second, but definitely one worth calling out, giving you the ability out of the box to ensure that your data planes are highly available, even in the case of losing the control plane. This release was released in February of this year, so only a couple of months ago. Our plugins are now FIPS 140-2 compliant. That's a cryptography compliance. And all of the cryptography libraries that Kong does use now and uses within their plugins is now based off of this compliance. And lastly, probably the latency-based steering. So this is a feature within Kong. If you're used to using Kong and setting upstreams, Kong does have the ability to give you a form of load balancing within the gateway itself. And this is a new mechanism using an exponential weighted moving average to effectively decide which upstream to send the traffic to based on who's got the best latency. So a really nice feature that's been added to Kong 3.2. So taking a deeper look into this data plane scale out feature, and this diagram is a really nice diagram to show exactly what it is that I'm talking about. So if you have the event, you're running in hybrid mode, and your connection to the control plane goes away, whether that's a network connection or your database goes down or your control plane goes down, but you need to scale out with some more data planes. Maybe at that point you hit some peak traffic and you need to scale out, with some more data planes. Effectively, what this scale out feature does is it allows your data planes to connect to some external storage, whether it's AWS S3 or any of the other cloud providers, and get a backed up version of your configuration. So you effectively configure your control plane to back up that configuration into this external storage. And then when the data plane comes up, if it can't connect to the control plane, it will effectively connect to your external storage, pull the configuration, load itself up, and then start managing traffic. Once the connection comes back again, it will connect to the control plane and then obviously receive any additional configurations if there have been any since that backup. This leads really nicely into a sneak peek feature that I'm going to be showing you about ensuring that your data planes are ready to actually manage the traffic once the configuration is loaded, and that's what I'm going to talk about next. So as mentioned, a bit of a sneak peek. I'm going to give you a bit of a sneak peek as to what's coming in Kong 3.3. So this is scheduled for deployment this week. So week beginning the 15th of May. So I have been told that it will be at least by the end of this week. A couple of really good features here that I think is worth calling out. So there's now a open API spec for the admin and developer portal APIs. So if you go to developer@konghq.com, you're able to actually view those specs now in a Swagger UI, and you will be able to see that, test it out, have a look at the responses, and effectively understand what the APIs look like. A really nice way of sort of playing around with the APIs. I think one of the most exciting ones from my standpoint is the new readiness endpoint. And this is the one I was talking about effectively with the data plane scale out. So what's really great about this new readiness endpoint is it will effectively only return a 200 once your data plane's configuration has been loaded. So it's an atomic operation. So it will only give a 200 once everything is ready and your data plane is ready to start managing traffic. That's effectively still hinging off of the status endpoint on port 8100, just with the path of status/config. So yeah, as soon as you've upgraded to this version, you can update your readiness probe in Kubernetes, and you'll be able to start using that. I'm sure the Helm chart from Kong will get updated with this new version, with that new readiness endpoint as well, and you'll be able to start using that. From a database standpoint, we now officially support Aurora in AWS, and we give the ability to do your credential management using AWS database IAM, and that effectively ensures that you don't have to store your username and passwords for the configuration for the database within your servers or your deployments. You can effectively use the AWS credential management and IAM to manage the connection to the database and to RDS, Postgres, or Aurora. So I think some really great features added to Kong 3. One other last one is the one that's sticking out right in the middle is a Konnect edition, and this Konnect improvement is effectively giving you the ability to add additional metadata to your data planes, and this is really nice, to especially get more information when you're using Konnect to effectively understand maybe what cloud provider they're running on, what version of Kong they're running on. Maybe what even region it's running in as well. So just getting that additional metadata stored with each of your data planes that are deployed with all of your runtime groups as well. So yeah, that's effectively the new changes that have come out in Kong 3. Now let's talk about upgrade strategy. So how effectively can you upgrade to Kong? So these are going to be very general strategies. What I will do afterwards is then talk about, depending on your deployment mode, which deployment strategies we recommend, or upgrade strategies we recommend you using. So the first is called dual cluster strategy. So this is probably the most recommended strategy for you. It gives you zero downtime and gives you the ability to roll back as well. The downside to this is you need additional resource. So depending on if you've got the capacity to effectively replicate everything. If you do have that, then this strategy is for you. Effectively, what you do is you deploy a new database, you back up your current database, and you sync that change into the new database. You deploy your new Kong instance, you run the migration jobs, which effectively migrates the schema within the database, and then you start canary releasing your traffic across between the two instances, and slowly, obviously just checking that you're, checking your observability, making sure that you're not getting any errors, and then obviously start slowly reducing the amount of traffic going to your old instance and increasing the amount on your new instance. And then once you've moved it the full way across, you can then pull down your older instance, in this case, Kong 2.8. The next strategy is what's called the in-place upgrade strategy. So this is normally used if you don't have the capacity to be able to completely replicate everything within your environment. This unfortunately has a little bit of downtime because you have to bring down your node before you do the upgrade. And there is a rollback strategy with this, but I've marked it in yellow because the rollback strategy here is more from your database dumps. So you will be able to get back to your previous state, but obviously while you're getting yourself back, there's going to be a bit of downtime. So how does this work? You back up your current database, you decommission your current Kong, so that's the one I've got here in red, 2.8. You deploy your new one pointed to the database, and you run your migration up and your migration finish jobs. There is a place for this, and I will talk about it in a bit more, but effectively, this is what you would use in your control plane, especially if you don't mind a little bit of downtime. This is what you can use there. You can also, as mentioned, and with the star there, you can also, use Helm to help with a lot of this. Helm does have the effectively jobs that run the migration up and finish for you. So you can simplify this a bit more using Helm. Moving on to the next one, the rolling upgrade strategy. So this effectively is designed for Kong in DBless, or if you're running upgrading your data plane, so within hybrid. Again, this gives you zero downtime and a rollback strategy as well. So how this works is you back up the Kong configuration if you're in DBless. If you're in the data planes within hybrid, you don't need to do that. And then effectively, you continuously install the new Kong nodes, migrate the traffic across. Once you're happy with that and everything's going fine, you then tear down the old Kong nodes. Okay, so those are the upgrade strategies, but what do I need to consider? What are the things I need to think about when I'm upgrading? So one of this slide talks about the general upgrade consideration. So this is not just for Kong 3, but for any Kong upgrade. One of the big things to understand is that Kong only supports one minor version upgrade at a time. So, if you are going from Kong 2.8 to Kong 3, you need to go from 2 to 8 to 3.0, 3.1, 3.2, and I'll show that in a bit more detail. Make sure you stop all of the changes to your data before you start your upgrades. Turn your CI/CD pipelines off, stop access to Kong Manager, stop access to Kong Admin API. Just make sure that the data isn't changing. It's not a moving goalpost when you're trying to upgrade. Make sure you've reviewed the changelog on the Kong documentation site. Read what's come, what's changed. It'll be highlighted, any deprecations, any breaking changes. It's always imperative that you read the changelog before you do any changes. If you've got any customizations to Kong itself or the Kong configuration, make sure you reapply that in your new instance. Any new Kong configuration parameters, make sure you've added those. And again, that's highlighted in the changelog. If you've had to customize your Nginx template, you need to make sure those customizations are ported across, especially with Kong 3. There has been a change to the Nginx template. So if you have duplicated it within your environment, make sure you're going to have to, unfortunately, either manually or try with Git to merge the changes between the two templates. If you've got any custom plugins, there's been a large amount of changes within the custom plugins and the PDK within Kong in Kong 3. Lots of libraries that have been either renamed or deprecated. So definitely worth reading the change logs. I can't go through all of them now, otherwise we would be here for 2 hours. But something, if you've got custom plugins, make sure you have tested those and taken into account all the PDK changes. And last but not least, take a backup. Make sure you back up before you do the upgrade. Do a database backup, database dump, and also run a Kong config DB export. So you've got 2 backups of the database of the data and 2 ways of being able to refresh the data if you need be. Now, some Kong 3 upgrade considerations. I mentioned before about the changes with the images. So effectively in Docker Hub, where the images are hosted, the convenience tags, so like 3.0.0 with sort of no operating system on the end of it, those tags have now moved. They used to point to the Alpine version of Kong. It now points to Debian. As of 3.2, the Alpine image has been deprecated and is no longer available. So if you have been using the convenience tags, and you have maybe built your own custom golden AMI, please test it out and take into consideration it's switched from Alpine to Debian, and you may have to take that into consideration if you've added anything additional to your golden AMI. I recommend migrating to either Debian or Ubuntu. The configuration cache on the data plane. So in Kong 3, they've changed to using a new in-memory data storage system called LMDB. So if you are doing anything around the configuration cache file on your data planes, you will need to make some changes. The name of the file as well as the location has changed. So that's something that's very important that you need to take into account. With the new Rust router that the data planes have, because it's been rewritten in Rust, that means there's been new libraries that have been used. The libraries use a new regex engine, and I've got a link here to that regex engine, the documentation about it. But if you are using regex roots, you need to ensure that you are testing them, because there have been some changes and the behavior of that library is slightly different. One of the changes in Kong 3 is it used to intelligently infer whether the root is a regex root or not. Now in Kong 3, you've got to be explicit. You have to mark your root with the tilde at the start, and that effectively tells Kong this is a regex root. The migration of your configurations using the Kong DB migration scripts will add this for you. So it will migrate the data for you, but still worth testing after a migration in a lower environment to make sure that still works. There is some missing functionality. The look around and back references, which are regex features, those are missing in this engine. So if you are using them, that's something you'll need to consider with the upgrade. The new engine also won't accept escaping of characters when they're not needed. That will actually cause a failure. So if you are escaping characters, make sure you aren't just escaping everything to make sure that it's all safe. You need to make sure that what you're escaping needs to be escaped. Otherwise, the regex engine will fail. And lastly, Unicode support is now added in the new engine, which is great. As mentioned already before, custom plugins and the PDK. Anyone with custom plugins, please test it out. Get the new version of Pongo and actually test out your custom plugins and make sure that they are ready for Kong 3 and the migration. The plugins, so the built-in plugins in Kong 3, the priorities of them have changed. If you depend on the priority, so the order that the plugins are running in, please look into that and make sure that the change in order does not affect the order of logic that you're expecting things to run in. Kong has released some new plugins, changes to current plugins and deprecations. Again, I can't go through all of them. There are quite a lot, but please read the change log to see all of those changes. And lastly, just an example of some configuration parameters, which I think are worth highlighting as well. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, but these are probably the most important ones. the router flavor. So this router flavor that refers to that new Rust router I spoke about. There effectively are three values you can set this at. Traditional, which effectively runs Kong in using the 2.8 router. So your root's still described as a JSON. There's traditional compatible, which runs the 3.x Rust router, but still your root's described in JSON. And lastly, the expressions field, which still uses the 3.x Rust router, but your roots are now expressed in the new expression format using the new DSL that has been released. You can't mix and match, unfortunately. So you need to choose one of these, and you know, in other words, you can't have some JSON, some expressions. If you move to expressions, you have to migrate all of your roots to expressions before you use that. I would recommend going with traditional compatible, so at least you're getting that new Rust router and the performance benefits from that, but still not needing to necessarily migrate all of your roots, especially if you've got a lot of them, and then have another task down the road to move to expressions later on. The next field is the LMDB map size. So this effectively is the size of the memory map that stores the configuration on the database. It is defaulted to 128 megs. If you have a very large configuration, so you have a lot of root services and plugins, this is going to be a field that you're going to need to tweak. So it's definitely one that you'll need to look at if you've got a lot of configuration. And lastly, the deployment prefix size. This is a Helm chart parameter, and effectively this is used to set the size of the persistent volume on your Kubernetes cluster for the prefix directory. This is where Kong stores on disk the LMDB cache file. Again, if you've got a very large configuration, you'll need to change this default to 256 megs. So, you know, configuration B and C, those two parameters, you'll need to tweak them based on your use case and the size of your configuration. So those are all of the considerations you need to think about before upgrading. So which strategy should I choose? So let's go through a couple of them, especially looking at firstly the EE strategy. So if you're running Kong Enterprise on-prem, if you're running in traditional deployment, you've got two options. You can either do your dual cluster upgrade, where you deploy another instance of Kong and a replication of your database, or you can do, and you know, that's giving you no downtime, or you can do your in-place upgrade as well, where you have a little bit of downtime, and you don't have to replicate your database. So those are your two options with the traditional deployment. Which one to choose is obviously based on your sensitivity to downtime. In DBless deployment, so DBless deployment, as mentioned before, the rolling upgrade strategy is the strategy for you. In hybrid deployment, hybrid can be broken up into two aspects: your control plane and your data plane. Your control plane can be treated as a traditional deployment. So effectively, you can upgrade your control plane, but leave your data plane serving traffic. So you can either go with your dual cluster or your in-place, again, depending on your sensitivity to downtime. Your data planes, those effectively, you'll use the rolling upgrade strategy. The Kong Ingress controller, as mentioned before, you know, this is run in a DBless mode. You'll use your rolling upgrade strategy, but there are a couple of additional manual tasks that you need to take into account. For those of you who work with Helm charts and know the limitations of them, you know that they don't manage your CRDs. So it will install your CRDs on your first installation, but upgrading, doing a Helm release upgrade, won't upgrade any of the CRDs. It will be marked in the change log for the Ingress controller. If you need to, you'll need to upgrade your CRDs manually, do your rolling upgrade strategy, and then lastly, upgrade your Kubernetes resources. So any of them that have changed, if there's been a plugin change, a configuration change, then that's something that you can do after your upgrade. So that's that's all of your enterprise upgrade strategies. Now having a look at your Konnect SaaS strategy. So with Konnect SaaS strategy, you can actually follow two of them. You can do your dual cluster upgrade. So similar to your your cluster upgrade with a lowercase c, but there's no database because obviously that's all managed by the Konnect SaaS offering. But what you have the ability to do here is actually deploy different versions of Kong and have them connect up to the same runtime group within Konnect. A really nice feature within Konnect gives you the ability to not have to worry about any sort of configuration migration. Konnect will understand and know the version of your data plane and send the correct configuration down to the data plane. The other way of doing it is a rolling upgrade strategy, which is the standard way of upgrading your data planes like you would in your hybrid deployment mode. So just to reiterate once again, currently Kong only supports one minor upgrade. So if you are upgrading your traditional deployment or your DBless deployments, you need to unfortunately upgrade one version at a time. So going from Kong 2.8, you would need to go to Kong 3.0, 3.1, and then lastly 3.2. And by the end of this week, you will have 3.3. Just want to give you an example of some upgrade strategies within hybrid, and what that looks like. So this example is using an in-place and rolling strategy. So this unfortunately has a bit of downtime with your control plane. So if you're happy with that, then that works really well, but there's no additional resources, which is really good. So how do you do this? Well, effectively, you upgrade your control plane from Kong 2 to Kong 3.0 and do the database changes, database migrations. Once that's done, you then upgrade your data plane to the same version in Kong, connect them all up, make sure everything is working. Once you've done that, you can then upgrade your control plane to 3.1, your data plane to 3.1, your control plane to 3.2, and your data plane to 3.2. Doing this incrementally also helps to ensure that if you do have errors, you know which error or which version has caused the error. Going directly to Kong 3.2 or the latest version of Kong, there have been so many changes. So actually being able to understand where the issues lie, if there have been any issues, becomes quite difficult, which is why we recommend this way of deploying or upgrading. Looking at hybrid using a dual cluster deployment. So again, this gives you no downtime, but you need the additional resources, which is why I've marked that in yellow. So how do you do this? Well, effectively what you do is you create a new database, as mentioned before, and then you upgrade your control plane to the first version, and you do the schema upgrades for that version. You then upgrade to 3.1, do the schema updates, update to 3.2, do that. And then once you've done that, you effectively just deploy a new version of your data planes for the target version that you've ended up on. So in this case, Kong 3.2, and then you can start migrating traffic across. Again, because this is a dual cluster, you've got a replica of the configuration and of your installations. So you've got a really good rollback strategy within this example. Lastly, one that I wanted to talk about was actually the Konnect upgrade as well. If you're not on Konnect yet, a precursor to this would be to actually upgrade to Konnect first. And then once you have upgraded to Konnect, like mentioning before, what you would be able to do is effectively connect your data planes of one version into your runtime group, and then deploy a second version of Kong. In this case, your target version of 3.2. You don't have to go through each of the versions here because Konnect itself will manage the change in configuration. You can then canary release the traffic across. And once you're happy, you can then effectively deprecate or uninstall your older version of Kong. A really nice feature within Konnect and runtime groups, this ability to have different versions of your data planes connected to runtime groups within the SaaS offering. So talking about that, if you're not on Konnect and you actually are on enterprise and you are wondering about support and maybe how this upgrade is going to be a little bit easier in the future, don't fret. The long-term support has been released by Kong. 2.8 is long-term support until March 2025. the aim is to do a one-step upgrade from LTS version to LTS version. There will be a Kong 3 LTS version, which has not yet been announced. So I'm not too sure what version that will be. But if you are in a very complicated sort of architecture and system, and you would rather wait for that one-step deployment, there should be down the road the one-step upgrade to a Kong 3 LTS version. So what else do I need to consider with this upgrade? You know, I've spoken about upgrading your Kong gateway. That's probably only one aspect of what you currently use. You've also got your CI/CD pipelines, hopefully using Deck. If you are, you need to make sure that you've upgraded to at least version 1.15. 1.15 is where the features of Kong 3 have been added, and Deck then understands and is able to configure that across. So ensure that you upgraded your agents, if you've got agents or images that you're using to run, depending on what CI/CD platform you're using. If you've got declarative config stored in your database, the schema of that config has actually changed. So you will need to effectively update the configuration that's stored if you've got that in like a repository. Deck actually has a capability to do that. There's a command called deck convert. So you can actually convert the declarative config or have it as part of your pipeline where it takes the version 2 config, does a deck convert on the fly, and then syncs that across to your configuration. But I think actually getting what's in the repository updated is worthwhile doing. If you're using Pongo, as mentioned before, to test out your custom plugins, just upgrade to the latest version of Pongo. That will then ensure that you can test your plugins and ensure that they are Kong 3 compatible. And lastly, if you're running the Kong developer portal, make sure that you have effectively, once you've got to your target version, you have pulled the latest versions, versions to the templates, merge that into your developer portal, and then push them as well. So that's definitely something worthwhile thinking. You can either do that via the GitHub repo, where we've got the portal templates, or using the portal CLI, where you can run a portal fetch on your target version and fetch the latest template changes from the portal. So making all of those changes, you probably want to make sure you've made all of them, and then you should be in a really good state to ensure that you've upgraded Kong to the latest version of Kong 3. So we've come to the end of the presentation. Hopefully today was very informative to everyone. I hope you learned something. I'm sure there are some questions, so feel free to reach out to me via email. There's my email on the screen, as well as my LinkedIn profile. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to run through and have a conversation with anyone who has any questions around what I've spoken about today. But obviously reach out to to Kong themselves as well. Or even go onto the Kong Slack workspace as well. I'm on there too. Ask any of the questions that you need, and myself and the community will be able to help you if you've got any questions. So yeah, that's the end of it there. I see we've got a number of questions and stuff in the chat in that, Dahlia.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say thank you so much. That was so informative. Let's see the questions. We have quite a few in the Q&A function. Let's see.
Let me have a look. Okay, so there's actually there's two different chats, but let me try and have a look at them here. So any answer, the no answer, no. So Q&A, so John Williams, what scenario or requirements would help to in deciding the development modes, hybrid versus kick? So, I mean, I guess I did talk a little bit about that as well. The thing about hybrid is that you have to take into account the upgrading of your control plane as well. But I think the data planes and your kick data planes or proxies, they can follow the same upgrade strategy. So you don't have to worry about choosing something else there. But hybrid has an additional upgrade part to take into account with the control plane. So hopefully that has answered your questions. Is there backwards compatibility guaranteed? There's, Kong follows semantic versioning. There isn't backwards compatibility between Kong 3 and Kong 2. There are a number of break-in changes, but there is backwards compatibility within your minor version within Kong 3. So again, we're following semantic versioning with major and minor and patch. So the minors and patch won't have any break-in changes unless we have explicitly called it out. Oh, sorry, that was jumping around. Daniel Hill, really surprised to see data plane metadata for Konnect only. When is this coming to Kong Gateway? So the metadata, yeah, really nice feature, and that's a really good ask. It currently is a feature as part of what are called runtime groups, if you're familiar with Konnect. So unfortunately, right now, runtime groups are not available as part of on-prem EE. I think there might be a possibility of it coming further down the road, but you're looking at maybe next year at this stage. Nothing is guaranteed right now, unfortunately, just for Konnect. Edwin, unfortunately, we're still running Cassandra. Is it possible to migrate easily from Cassandra to Postgres? We tried an export, but it errored out with a key not provided. We're having key ring as all developer portal. Yeah. So yeah, unfortunately, Cassandra has been deprecated now, and Kong is not supporting it. If you are using keyring, so things are encrypted, it's probably going to be a quite difficult migration to do. Personally, I haven't done a Cassandra to Postgres migration, but if you are having issues with that, Edwin, I think log a support ticket or come to the community via the Slack workspace, and we can always ask that to the engineering team and see if they've got any strategies on how we can best help you with that. Francisco, can we go from 2.5 to the latest 3, or should we upgrade to something in the mid first? Yeah, I should have mentioned that. I would recommend upgrading to 2.8 first. So you should be able to do that upgrade in sort of one fell swoop. There have been some break-in changes between 2.5 and 2.8. So you will have to work on that. There have been some configuration name changes. I think it was around about 2.7. But then you have to do the incremental upgrades version by version, as mentioned already. The problem with the one-step upgrading is Kong can be deployed in a number of different ways. And it's almost too complex to ensure that every use case is actually taken into account. So once you've got to version 2.8, then just follow the strategies of doing one minor version upgrade at a time. Let's see, when upgrading Kong from version 2 to 3, is there any considerations regarding plugins? Yes, there are. As already mentioned, if you've got custom plugins, please have a look at the PDK changes. That's very important. The out-of-the-box plugins as well, some have been deprecated. Some have had some configurations changed. One I would like to highlight is probably the Prometheus plugin. So out of the box in Kong 3, the Prometheus plugin now has 5 new configuration parameters. So effectively, it won't be logging all of the metrics out of the box. This is to give you the ability to increase the performance. If you don't want all of the metrics, you can effectively turn them on or off. But effectively doing the upgrade to Kong 3, you might all of a sudden go, where are all my metrics in Prometheus? Effectively, this is one use case where you need to make sure that you now are adding additional configuration to that plugin so that you're getting the metrics that you're interested pushed into Prometheus. That's one example. Again, please read the changelog to get a more exhaustive list. Again, if I went through all the plugins, I'd probably need a session just for the plugins. Sorry, Francesca, any considerations for existing exposed APIs, configured plugins, and custom plugins? if I'm reading that correctly, I guess you're looking for some kind of considerations for upgrading things that are currently already exposed. Again, make sure that you effectively deploy this in a lower environment. Make sure you've tested it out. And then depending on your upgrade or your sensitivity to downtime, choose which of the upgrade strategies you currently want to use. I'll give you a good example. I actually recently have tested out deploying the Kong developer portal running on EC2 using autoscale groups, using Terraform, and using a feature called lifecycle management within your Terraform resources with zero downtime. It deployed a new EC2 instance, brought them up, made sure that they were running, and then effectively behind the scenes just swapped the autoscale groups under my load balancer. And I was testing it out, got zero downtime. So there definitely are strategies, bringing it into your infrastructure as code systems that you can effectively deploy things that are currently being run with there being zero downtime. But again, make sure you've tested this in lower environments to ensure that everything will go smoothly when you do your production release. Chuck, can clarify what very large is with regards to numbers of routes, hundreds, thousands, cents? Very good question. I would probably say large is in the thousands. So when you get to, sort of maybe around between 5,000 and 10,000 Kong entities. So an entity is anything from a service, route, or a plugin. All of it contributes towards the size of the configuration. So when you're getting into the thousands, that's where, you'll need to be tweaking things. When you're sort of down in the lower hundreds, you'll probably be fine as is. But again, depending on your use case, you need to make sure that you are testing it in your lower environments. Anonymous router flavor is not included in 3. So how is it then possible to migrate? I think you mean in 2. If you need to migrate your routes that have regex, thinking about, yeah. So effectively what happens is, when you migrate to Kong 3, the Kong migration script, so migration up and finish, it will do the migration of your regex routes to ensure that they are picked up by the new Kong router. Kong 3 does have the router flavor parameter. Setting that to, like I said, traditional compatible is the way to go with your first deployment from 2 to 3. So yeah, you should be fine in doing that. And then once you're on Kong 3, then just migrate all the way up, leaving that router flavor to the same value. Why you consider going from 2.8 to 3 a minor version upgrade? Isn't there a 2.9? Good question. Currently, right now, there isn't a 2.9. There are still patch versions that are coming into Kong 2.8. I don't think there is a 2.9 scheduled. I understand going from 2.8 to 3.0 isn't a minor upgrade, but it is a major version. But it is, effectively when you do a major version, you need to go to the version 0.0 of that major version, and that is supported within the upgrade strategy. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm on Kong version 2.5. Which version should I upgrade to first, Francesco? Like I said, I would upgrade to 2.8. So the latest 2.8 first, and then once you're on 2.8, then upgrade to 3 after that. John Williams, when upgrading on the hybrid mode, how does the control plane upgrade does not impact the data plane runtimes? No, again, because your data planes don't need to be connected to your control plane to actually serve traffic, the control plane upgrade won't affect your data planes. They will still be able to run on the last known configuration. So that should be able to help you there. Has Kong 3.x been open sourced? Yes, the open source version of Kong 3 is available. I know it did talk a lot about enterprise and enterprise features, but Kong.3 is there. There are a lot of capabilities that are there as well. I would follow the same upgrade strategy with Kong open source as well. Okay, Francesco. And then Vadzim, based on the upgrade documentation, we can go from 2 to 3.1 directly. Are there any concerns to this upgrade? Why do you recommend? So there have been some changes, and I know you have linked to there. There have been some changes to the documentation. I've been advised to recommend going to 3.0 first. Again, it's very based on your use case. If you've got a very simple deployment of Kong, you could probably go, from 3.0, from 2.8 to 3.1. But I recommend doing it in a methodical upgrade strategy, and it'll ensure that you, if you do have any issues at each upgrade, you then it's easy to work out what has gone wrong for you to then fix that to then effectively move on. So that's all the Q&As. Hopefully, we've got a new one from Anonymous. We're on 2.7, plan to switch from on-prem to hybrid. I guess you mean traditional. Would you suggest to upgrade first to make the switch to hybrid first? Very good question. Yeah, I think effectively maybe upgrading to 2.8 first, getting that out of the way, and then switching to hybrid might be the best way to do it. There's less things to worry about. You then only have to update or upgrade one node rather than your control planes and your data planes. So it'll be a lot less for you to upgrade if you do first from your versions to 2.8 and then do traditional to hybrid after that. Cool. That's all the Q&A. I know we're starting to run out of time, Dahlia. There might be a couple of questions in the chat as well. Let's see here. SAML for Kong 3 Manager. Let me actually, for 3.1, I think I actually mentioned that. Let me go back. Let me close this. Go back in my slides. I know there has been talk of it. There was SAML here. I think it was the SAML 3.0. It's a SAML plugin. So I don't know whether there is with the Kong Manager, but it's something we can have a look up, David, and I can check with you. To be honest, most of my customers use OIDC for doing their platform authentication. Looking to upgrade. Okay, I think a lot of these were in the Q&A. Reasons behind the migration to Debian or Ubuntu-based images. So yeah, effectively what the reason for that is, it was the deprecation of Alpine, and effectively a lot of the libraries that Kong needed to actually install Kong weren't part of the Alpine image. And just to help Kong, when it comes to security vulnerabilities, they don't want to have to also manage operating system vulnerabilities, but just vulnerabilities that affect Kong itself. So going to Debian was the best direction for them. Debian comes packaged with everything that Kong needs to be installed. When it comes to your images, make sure you're building your own golden images. Kong is there to manage the security vulnerabilities for Kong itself, not the operating system vulnerabilities. That needs to be something for yourselves to take care of. Latest documentation for Pongo. If you just go to the Pongo GitHub repo, it'll have the documentation there on how to use that. Get the slides. I'm sure we can share the slides. Some custom plugins sort of refer to code of existing plugins, but the default plugins are changed to. Okay, I don't think that was a question. That's management. That is what version of EE in order to upgrade to Konnect. Good question. So actually, I would get onto 2.8 at least to get to Konnect. And then there will be a mechanism to convert your config using DEC into a Konnect format to then push that into Konnect. So get onto 2.8 for sure to do that. Cool. That's all the questions.
All right. We're right on the hour. Thank you so much, Andrew.
That was lots of questions. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining. It was a pleasure having you. I hope this was useful for you. Our next user call is on June 13th. You can find the link here. And I hope to see you there. Have a great evening, great day, and see you soon.
Brilliant.
Bye.
Thanks a lot for coming, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye.